All right. So as we continue to um, work through this large unit of personality, intelligence, motivation, and emotion, let's start to dig into kind of understanding intelligence a little bit. Okay. And this is one of my favorite graphics in notes because I really like the way that it breaks down understanding or quantifying intelligence. And when we look at intelligence, it's often looked at as some type of um, perceived gift, right? That some people have it and some people don't. Or others on the other side will talk more about experience and lived uh, um, opportunities to learn things. Really, what it is both. Okay. So if you see down at the bottom, nurture works on what nature endows, or as I like to put it, nurture allows what nature endows. Because I think that sounds a little bit better. But if you go back through, you can see part of our intelligence, yes, has to be biological, right? Because we're born and we have a brain, and that brain has got a um, an ability at some level to grow, expand, create, connect, and so on, right? But on the other hand, it's also shaped by our family structures, by where we live, our cultures, what we experience, what we do, and everything else. So when we look at intelligence, it's neither of these. It's a combination of both, right? That you've got to have some biological predisposition to learning or knowledge or whatever we would be considering at that point intelligence. So we can get into that later on. Versus where you live. Oh, excuse me, I had a little bit on there. Where you live, or how you've constructed that knowledge. So let's dive in. So if we look at it from the biological standpoint, right? I know we've talked a little bit on and off about twins, but every individual person, barring your identical twins, which share the exact same genetic makeup, have different sets of DNA, have different brains and structures, right? So you may have come across siblings, and both of them are very, very intelligent and skilled and charismatic. But maybe you've come across siblings that's the exact opposite. It's the exact opposite, and that one is and one is not, and that's really the reason why. Okay, or one of them at least. But it's also difficult to discount the fact that many times identical twins, if for some reason reared apart, can differ in intelligence, can differ in the personality and all these other things. So being able to understand this dance between what is biological and then what is environmental is crucial to understanding intelligence. Okay, so here we are with relatedness. And some other reasons why we put this up here and talk about relatedness is if you take a look at offspring of schizophrenic patient, right? So we're not quite to disorders, clinical psychology, all that kind of stuff. But what it does is it helps us understand where biologically that children could possibly fall, right? Because you take the predispositions of one parent, predispositions of another parent, what their skills and abilities are. You mash that DNA together, and bada bing, that's what you've got. So this is why it's important to understand where you come from and what you're predisposed to, not only intellectually, but also say in forms of cancer and other things. It's good to know where you came from and the degree to which that is important to you. Okay. Here's another kind of look at that. Okay. More genetic overlapping. I'll let you kind of work through some of those. It's really interesting to see how genetics play a difference. But here, what you can do is you can take a look at this, right? We got our identical twins up at the top, reared together, identical twins reared apart. Take a look at that too, right? So if we're looking at IQ scores, and we'll get into it later, the merits and importance of IQ scores, but you've got a 0.14% difference between identical twins that are reared in the same place versus those similar IQ scores between identical twins that were reared apart. So that in and of itself is strong evidence that nurture plays a large role in this, right? Remember, nurture allows what nature endows. And then if you drop down a little bit further to that bracket, siblings reared together versus siblings reared apart. So you get about 50% of the IQ correlation of siblings that are reared in the same household. So mind you, 50% of their genetic makeup is different. Okay, 50% is similar. So you see, not only is it 50% of their genetic makeup is different, but also living in different places drastically drops those IQ scores, right, in terms of similarity. So these are just cases. This is just data to show to you to help you understand that play between nature and nurture when it comes to our intelligence. Okay, here's some more relatedness. Now let's take a look at our IQ and how this is measured and what we want to understand about it. So when we talk about nature and our biological predisposition to intelligence, we are often born with a range of intelligence, right? That we're able to comprehend. Some of us who are, geniuses could be born with a range much like Alice's towards the bottom, where at the lowest end, your IQ is going to be about a 125, but could push up around 150, which is remarkable, right? That's extremely remarkable. Or you could be somebody more like Jack, who's fallen between about 65 and 85. And that's the biological predisposition to their inherited intellectual range. Now, when we factor in the environment, right, the quality of the environment, so we're talking about stimulating material in that home, we're talking about love, care, nutrition, sleep, warmth, all the stuff that would go into an environment. Those that are enriched, you see them at the top. You see Tom, Kimberly, and Ted. So enriched means Tom has a predisposition to a lower range of intellectual ability, but he's maximizing what he has, right? He goes up to 85 and he's at an 84. So he's getting the absolute most out of what his cognitive abilities are. Kimberly's fairly high. Again, she can get up to probably about 120. She's a 117. And Ted could get up to about 130, a little bit more. He's at 127. So what that tells us about their families is that they're cared for, most likely, but this isn't all the time. Most likely, they probably have a two-parent household, that they have plenty to eat, good, nourishing food. They can get plenty of sleep. They're emotionally cared for, and so on. That gives them the opportunity to maximize the range. On the average scale, you can see the Susan, Jerome, and Chris. They're in the middle. They're right in the middle range of what their cognitive abilities are, and you see those that are deprived. Maybe they live in an abusive household, or they're malnourished, or they don't have a consistent roof. All that kind of stuff. They didn't grow up with books, so they're impoverished and so on. So you see kind of what that does to be able to maximize your intellectual ability. Here's another one. We look at our overachievers. We look at our underachievers based upon their inherited reaction range or their predisposition to intelligence. Okay, and here are a couple of videos, right, that kind of explain how some of this all works. You got the epigenetics, and then you've got the battle between nature and nurture, which you may have seen earlier. I do not remember, but it's good if you haven't, right?